This is the Cleveland Real Estate Investor Podcast. On this episode, Mike Reilly is joined by Mike Ferrante to discuss the mindset of investing in not just a house, but a neighborhood. There are a lot of internal and external factors to consider when making an investment. We also discuss areas that are up and comers in Cleveland that you'll want to keep an eye out for. And we give some more love to one of our favorite neighborhoods, Forest Hill. We talk about all of this and more. Stay tuned. But first, a word from our sponsor.
Hi, this is Mike Ferrante with Century 21 Homestar and the 21 Mike team. And let's be honest, sometimes selling a house can be a real hassle. If you're in the Heights area, you have to worry about those pesky point of sale violations. You have to do other preparations to get your house ready for showings. And what about staging? That's why we work with Reilly Painting and Contracting to help sellers get top dollar for their house. So give us a call at 216-373-7727 or email info@21mike.com. The 21 Mike team, your one-stop shop for buying and selling.
All right. Good morning, everybody. It's a Sunday, late morning, which means it's time after 2 or 3 cups of coffee to get together with our sidekick, Mike Ferrante. Good morning, Mike.
Good morning, Mr. Reilly. Cappuccino in hand. I am ready.
Okay. And how many cappuccinos are you into already?
Well, much like you, I start the day with a tea, and then I progress to cappuccino just before the morning is over.
Before you launch on the podcast? Right.
That's right.
Well, we're seeing, I'm watching Richard Branson's cycling into New Mexico, his space headquarters. It's almost looking like a parody, something out of Austin Powers.
Yeah, speaking of launching.
I don't, it'll be interesting to see what the take is on that. But anyways, let's get back to our little neck of the woods here. Our episode this morning, we've got 2, but the first one is going to be about investing in a neighborhood and not just in a house. Now, I will flesh out what that means, and then we can just start getting into the weeds. We talked earlier podcasts about micro-targeting, where different blocks in Cleveland Heights, Shaker Heights, the inner ring suburbs, different blocks have a different investment level. How would you define it, micro-targeting, Mike?
Yeah, I think it's really important to understand that concept that you're not just buying this isolated property that has no effects on it from outside forces. That's why we talk about blocks and neighborhoods. Case in point, think about the neighborhoods of Ohio City, Tremont. These neighborhoods evolved into what they are today, and it has to start somewhere.
Right. And when we talk about Ohio City and Tremont, for people that are in Japan or Australia who are listening to us, or New Zealand or the North Pole, they may not know what Ohio City and Tremont is, but they may know what Brooklyn is. Brooklyn, New York. And Brooklyn 25 years ago was a very sketchy neighborhood. And if you had plunked down 50,000 on a brownstone, that would be worth 10 million today. Or like buying, if you had bought Microsoft or Apple stock, 30 years ago, or Amazon, the appreciation would just be staggering. Now, I'm not saying Cleveland is like that, like a Brooklyn or an Apple stock, but if you had bought, let's say, $100,000 and you had bought a condo in Little Italy or Tremont, when it was first just a nothing neighborhood, what has been the appreciation in those neighborhoods, Mike? Can you answer that?
I don't have exact numbers for you, but it's night and day. It's kind of the analogy you made to Brooklyn. Houses in those neighborhoods used to just be the same as the rest of Cleveland, but certain anchors in the neighborhoods developed and matured. I think we talked about how the West Side Market has always been a staple of that Ohio City neighborhood. And then when the microbreweries and the art galleries and restaurants started booming in that area, people wanted to live close. So that's kind of what happened. And I know you have some specific examples you'll probably talk about in other areas for people that don't know Cleveland. But I would say that it's the same sort of thing. Back in the day, you could pick up houses in Cleveland for 20, 30, $40,000. And these days you can't even pick up a vacant lot in Ohio City for that kind of money.
Right. And we're seeing, we did a podcast earlier about people proudly crowing that they just went ahead and bought 5 properties at 30,000. Yeah, I just went ahead and bought 5 properties. I think it was a podcast we did a year ago. And basically they just overpaid by probably 10,000 each. And they're in an area that's not only declining, but is about to go over the cliff in terms of just abandoned vacant houses. And they're going to lose their shirt on that investment. But that same person had bought 5 properties for 25,000, or let's just say for the sake of math, four properties at 25,000. So that's 100,000. And they had bought in Tremont 10 years ago. That 100,000 would now be worth $1 million easily. Those properties. That's how cheap they were 10, 15 years ago. And now, I mean, between all the new builds and stuff like that, the appreciation is just staggering. So what this podcast is about is investing in a neighborhood. Which is the next neighborhood that's going to pop? The next Tremont, the next Ohio City, the next Little Italy. Those 3 neighborhoods right now are booming. The Royal Heights, that's another neighborhood. So we're up to 4. But right now, they're at their peak. You buy in that, you're not getting, I don't think you're getting much appreciation. You'll be living in a real hipster area, but you're paying top dollar to move in there.
Yeah,
Correct?
I would agree. I would say that a good way to put it is that they've hit somewhat of a plateau. So I think that for the foreseeable future, all the property values here in Cleveland will continue to go up just because that's the state of the market. But I think they've hit what I would describe as a plateau.
Right. Let's say we've got 3 buckets. So everybody visualize 3 buckets. The first bucket is the plateau bucket. Those neighborhoods that are now what I call destination neighborhoods. Ohio City, Little Italy, Tremont, Royal Heights. So that's the gold bucket. The next bucket is the garbage can. Those are parts of Cleveland, East Cleveland, that are about to be razed. I mean, literally clear cut. The vacant houses in that area has reached a critical point where you may have one street where there's 2 viable houses surrounded by 8 houses that are literally ready to fall apart, fall in, and are going to be clear cut. So that's the garbage can. The third can is the one that we're looking at, which is the next neighborhood. Am I making sense?
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. Yes.
Okay, let's go for it. Now let's look at that. Bucket. That bucket has certain neighborhoods in it that are about to explode. Now you could get neighborhoods, say like the Meadowbrook Lee area, the Kensington area, and that's a kind of quasi hipster area, but that's not going to be an Ohio City or Tremont. Would you agree with that?
I think that when you ask me to speculate, it's tough because I have my opinions, and I guess I should preface any opinions I say by, this isn't financial advice, and I don't want to have someone say, "Oh, but Mike Ferrante said so." But I would say the Meadowbrook Lee area is more of a plateaued area. Like I don't see that one as to use your words, ready to pop.
Right.
I see that as more of an established area that is more of a plateau type neighborhood.
Okay, so it's not, okay, so let's do a 4th bucket. It's a plateaued area, but it's not a destination neighborhood. The Royal Heights is a destination neighborhood. That's a defined, that is a defined area. It's got that. If people are on Google Maps, take a look at it. Go to the corner of Fairmont Boulevard and South Taylor, zip code 44118. You're going to see On the Rise Bakery, the hair salon, the yoga studio,
What's that little French restaurant there?
Gigi's.
Yes.
Okay, now that is the center. That's the little town square of that neighborhood. Then you go down to Fairmont Cedar. That's another kind of Royal Heights, really plateau, a defined destination neighborhood. You go down Fairmont Boulevard at the intersection of Fairmont and Cedar. That's Fairmont Cedar. And that area is a defined destination. It's like, I would call that second tier destination. It's not Little Italy, but it's that second tier where the property values have pretty much, I think, plateaued. So where is that next Brooklyn? Where is that next Tremont? And that brings us to my neighborhood, Forest Hill. Everybody write down Forest Hill, not Forest Hills with an S, but Forest Hill. And that encompasses parts of Cleveland Heights and parts of East Cleveland. It's defined by Lee Boulevard to its west, Mayfield Road to its south, and I'm getting my streets. You got Mayfield Road, and then you have Taylor Road, and you have Lee Boulevard. It's sort of a triangle, and I'll throw a street out. Everybody go with their maps. Follow me on your maps to a street called Wyatt, Wyatt. Put a star there. Save it. Take a drive down that street. There are only 8 or 9 houses on that street, and that'll give you a feel of what Forest Hill is like. Now, what's your take on Forest Hill, Mike, before I get into my spiel?
Well, again, I don't want to say I'm giving financial advice here. I see Forest Hill as one of those neighborhoods that has a very rich history. Mike, and I think you should talk about the Rockefeller homes there. Some incredible, beautiful homes, and a rich history, and in a city, Cleveland Heights, that has a lot of amenities. Now, during the recession, and when the housing market dipped so greatly, Cleveland Heights was one of those cities that got hit hardest. And I think largely because of their point of sale inspection. And that's a little teaser for our next podcast, which I think we're going to talk about point of sales and the kind of effect that they have and had on neighborhoods. But I think whenever you have a neighborhood or a city that dips, you always have to look at it to see what is the potential for the upside. And certainly with the rich history and beautiful housing stock in the Forest Hill neighborhood, it's got a potential for that upswing that you're alluding to.
Okay, now when you look at Forest Hill, here's what it has going for it. Number one, it's up the hill from East Cleveland. I mean, literally up the hill. And so there's a natural barrier between the East Cleveland dysfunction and the housing stock, which is getting raised and torn down, and go up the hill, and it's night and day, literally night and day, the housing stock. Number two, let's keep on with the housing stock. These homes were all custom built. Think about that. Custom built homes starting in the 1920s, when John D. Rockefeller took his summer estate called Forest Hill and subdivided a big section of that to do its first planned community. The irony of Forest Hill is it was literally one of the first planned communities. It had underground wiring. It had streets that were all built in a kind of semi cul-de-sac layer. If you're looking at the maps, everybody, you'll see what I'm seeing. Just look at Wyatt, how these streets, there's no real cut through streets there, but it's not cul-de-sacs. Third was they dictated the first build in the 20s, 100 of these Rockefeller mansions. Now, if you look at Wyatt, you're going to see a row of about 4 Rockefeller mansions. They look like French chateaus. They brought in the architect who had laid out the brownstones in Brooklyn and in the Upper East Side, and also in Greenwich Village. And he used the same blueprint to build these freestanding houses. The garages are underground, and they have these real unusual garage doors that don't go up and down, but roll almost like a little mini castle. These garage doors roll sideways. So it's a 2-car garage. You literally drive underground, and there you are in your house, and you walk up. So it's almost like a little condominium. It has poured concrete / plaster walls, which means you have to take dynamite to blow them out. The foundation is steel girders. Think about that. So when you walk into these houses, which are now over 100 years old, some of them, early 1920s to where we are now, there's no crack in the walls because the house is not shifting. And you have huge slate roofs, you have copper wiring, you have copper gutters, you have steel windows, which are not super efficient, but it's offset by the fact that they're all boilers. So believe me, you're not cold in the winter. Plus you have 3 full baths, 2 half baths, 2 fireplaces, 4 bedrooms. And these homes, a couple of years ago, were going, when it had hit rock bottom after the crash, we're going in the low 120s. Jump in here, Mike.
Yeah.
Am I missing something?
I just want to make sure I wasn't muted. So, so the Rockefellers, that is about as far as they dipped. But when you start talking about the other houses in the neighborhood, they were going in the 40s. I saw some of them. So, and the way you've described them, Mike, people just have to pull up pictures of these houses because they are the nicest of the nicest houses here in the Cleveland area. Now sure, you could go to some parts of Shaker, Pepper Pike, and see some larger mansions, but these homes are as beautiful as they get here in town.
Right, and they're surrounded by homes that were also custom built. That's the interesting thing. You have ranch style homes that were built in the early 50s that were 4 bedrooms. Now let me rewind the tape here. Let's go back to the founding of Forest Hill. In the 20s, they built these 100 Rockefeller mansions, and then the Depression came. Then they built, the second build was in the late 30s, 38, 39. The house I'm in now was built in 39. It was a whole different type of architecture, more Connecticut country homes, but they were all custom built, every one of them in 1939. Then the war came. And of course, so you had a flurry of homes built in the late 30s, the war comes, and then you get the post-war build, which has 2 distinct builds. 1949, 48, with supply chain now is, not disrupted anymore. They're getting back into building, and they're building these custom homes. And again, they're picking up more of the Connecticut farm country houses. But starting in the early 50s, there was a huge rush to build Frank Lloyd Wright mid-century modern homes. And you've seen these homes. Mike, comment?
Yeah, definitely a unique style. And you can just walk into these homes and immediately pick out what era they're from. That, they've got some of the unique features. We were just in one last week, and even the furniture was still from that era. And you said, oh, look, I remember growing up with coffee tables like that. You just know when you walk in what era the house is from.
Rounded walls, kind of the granite fireplaces, the classic mid-century modern. houses. Now I want everybody, make a note, drive down Monticello. Okay, I'm going to take you down Monticello and go to the corner of Monticello and Burlington. And I want you to look for a ranch style house, fairly large. As you drive down Monticello, it would be on your right at the corner of Burlington and Monticello. You'll see a red house with a tree, huge tree, growing through the middle of the house. That was a Frank Lloyd Wright. Either he designed it, his studio designed it, or one of his disciples built it. And that was in the early 50s, the defining house in Forest Hill. The surrounding houses around that house were all state-of-the-art, custom built, Frank Lloyd Wright, classic mid-century modern houses. You could go to Palm Springs. You could take these houses and put them in Palm Springs, and they wouldn't be out of character. That's the interesting thing about Forest Hill is the customization, the quality of the builds, the one-of-a-kind houses. Okay, so these houses aren't going anywhere. They're not like inner city Cleveland, parts of East Cleveland, the surrounding, some of these surrounding areas that are really declining. These homes are the word's going to get out about the cachet of these homes. And you're going to start seeing people filter in and recognize the value they can get in purchasing these houses. Comment, Mike?
Yeah, and what's amazing, Mike, is the housing here is still what I would consider very affordable. We've talked a lot about how the values are changing, how they're rising. We had almost a 20% appreciation in Northeast Ohio last year. And I don't know that we've capped out yet. I think that we're still adjusting for how undervalued homes were, not only in neighborhoods like Forest Hill, but all of Northeast Ohio. So it'll be interesting to see how high they do go.
Okay, so I'm going to stop talking about the houses. They're fantastic, and you can see if people go to ReillyProperties.com, we own at least a dozen homes in the Forest Hill area on our Airbnb, and they're not a lot of vacancies here. They are very popular because they're ranch style homes. They have first floor master suites. And now let's start getting into what makes the next destination neighborhood, the next super neighborhood. Is you've got the housing, now you've got the uniqueness, add in the proximity. Everybody look at that map now. It is a 10-minute bicycle ride to the Cleveland Clinic, to the Cleveland Orchestra, to the Art Museum, to University Circle, right down the hill. It's right there. Very, very popular for interns, residents, people that are working in the medical industry, the biotech. You've got Case, Western Reserve, down the hill in University Circle. So Forest Hill will be the bedroom community for these doctors, these biotech people, these professors. In fact, they're already living here, but the word's going to start getting out that this neighborhood is only going to get better and get more appreciated by the buyers. And pretty soon the word's going to get out that this neighborhood is about to break this big wave.
Yep. So I think it's important to think about what the new buyer wants in their housing. And, we've seen after COVID, people don't necessarily want to be all stacked up on one another. So the downtown living, I think, is still going to be popular. But like in areas like New York City, we know the mass exodus that happened there. people came to Cleveland, and we've talked about that in past podcasts. But I guess the point I'm getting to is that a neighborhood like Forest Hill has the best of both worlds. So you're close to all this stuff. A couple of the destinations you didn't mention were Little Italy, Coventry. These are areas that are walking distance or bicycling distance, but they want the combination of the walkability, the proximity, with a blend of, yeah, but I also have my own space. I have my own yard. And one of the things you didn't mention about the housing in Forest Hill is that they're not these little 0.10 acre lots like you have in a lot of areas of Cleveland, even Cleveland Heights. These are some sizable yard space, and you've got parks nearby. It's what the buyer wants today after the evolution of the market after COVID.
Exactly. And the proximity is one thing, the uniqueness of the housing stock. I mean, I'm talking about houses that were custom built that have granite, I repeat, granite windowsills, that have 12-foot ceilings in the basement with a finished basement and a big fireplace, attached garages. In fact, if people just drive around on Google Street Maps, one thing you're going to notice, there are no detached garages, none, because Forest Hill zoning required that everything be attached, which means when you walk into the backyards, and just look at the satellite view, when you look at the backyards, you will not see a garage. You'll just see the backyards are designed so they're like parklands. And you'll also see there are no overhead telephone lines, electrical lines, because everything was mandated to be built underground. Forest Hill, up until 1964 with the fair housing laws, was a country club. I'm a Catholic, and maybe I was on a waiting list because they limited the number of Catholics. Forget if you're Jewish. Sorry, Mike, Italians, I don't think so. I mean, it was Leave It to Beaver time.
Yeah.
This neighborhood. So people can, if you can imagine, in the 50s, if they were approved to buy land in Forest Hill, they were overjoyed. So they would hire the best architect, and it was almost like an arms race in the 50s. The result is what you see 60, 70 years later in these houses, the most unique custom-built houses in the Cleveland area. Now, number 3 is the Metro Parks, is the Forest Hill Park, which has been taken over by Metro Park. It is no longer run by East Cleveland. It is, I want everybody to take a look on their maps. Go to the intersection of Forest Hill Boulevard and Lee Boulevard, and you'll see the Forest Hill Park with the lake, the boathouse, the bridle paths where people are running and taking their bikes within a 5-year period. Within 5 years, what's going to happen is the Metro Park are going to pave those roads, pave those bridle paths, those bike paths, and you'll be able to get on your bike and literally take a bike path down to University Circle. If you're working at the clinic, University Hospital, Case, you'll be able to take your bike and go through a park to get to work. So you've got the parks as the number 3 component, along with the proximity, along with the uniqueness of the neighborhood and the housing.
Yeah, and I was just doing the math, Mike. I added up the 3 sections there, and it's over 220 acres.
Of parkland.
Yeah.
If you've got a ranch house, we own one of our ranch houses. People can go to Reilly Properties and see our Lee Boulevard rental. That's right on Lee, at the intersection of Lee and Forest Hill Boulevard, and it's got a view of the lake. That is one of our most popular houses to rent short term to clinic patients. And the view is spectacular. And now they are beginning to pave the roads with the infrastructure bill, which has been a real sore point in the Forest Hill neighborhood, especially in the East Cleveland neighborhood, which is, struggling financially. Well, now you've got the infrastructure bill that is winding its way through Congress, and there is money that's going to be available to pave the roads and, do a little bit of, cleanup. So that's your third leg of the table. Anything to add before I get to the fourth leg?
No, I think you've summed it up there.
Okay, good. I could do this in my sleep. I've been talking about this for 5 years. Now I have a podcast. I can go on and on. But anyways, the fourth leg of the table that will make this a destination neighborhood is the Medusa building. I want everybody to go to the Cleveland Heights Rec Center, which is at the intersection of Lee Boulevard and Monticello. And I want you to look at this building called the Medusa building. And it's a curved building that was built in 1958. And that was the world headquarters of Medusa Cement. In fact, there was a huge cement carving of the legendary goddess, whatever, Medusa, with the snakes in her hair. And that was on the wall. And this was the building which was the icon for the mid-century modern. The Lever building in, is that the right word? The Lever building in New York, the first of the great mid-century modern buildings that started popping up in New York, the glass boxes. Well, this building is just phenomenal, and it's been vacant for 5, 6, 7 years, waiting for a buyer, and nobody knows what to do with this building. Well, guess who's putting together a consortium? That's on another podcast.
Right.
But, okay, but I'm looking to get together investors in a consortium to buy the Medusa building and do to it what they did to create the Chelsea markets in New York. Anybody been to New York and seen the transformation of the meat packing district? They took the creation of the High Line, which I just absolutely love. The new Whitney Museum in New York is where at the beginning of the High Line is. Then you have the whole rise of the West Village, which I think is one of the most interesting neighborhoods in New York. And then you have Chelsea Markets, which was formerly the headquarters of the National Biscuit Company. And the trains would come in and drop off the flour or the wheat or whatever, and that's all they did was, and then it became vacant. And you can see what the meatpacking district looked like in the 70s or 80s when you see the French Connection or some of these, New York crime movies or, Death Wish or whatever. The whole area just went to pot, to seed, whatever you want to call it. And then these forward-looking people developed the High Line, which I think is one of the great urban renewal designs of all time, was the High Line. Anybody doesn't know what the High Line is in New York? Go to Wikipedia, read about it. And then the High Line built, when the High Line got going, then Chelsea Markets was created, and you had everything along the High Line was gentrified. Now, if you had bought probably for $20,000, a small apartment building there, 25 years ago, it's now worth 10 million because of the High Line. So I'm looking at the Medusa building, converting that into a mixed use Chelsea Markets type setup, bakery, Brooklyn style butcher place, herb farm, art gallery, space for having, concerts, the whole 9 yards. Get that fountain going in front, get it lit up. That would be the beacon of this new neighborhood, this new rejuvenated neighborhood called Forest Hill. Okay, my spiel's over, Mike. Just
so the whole time
let me
you're
catch
talking,
my breath.
Right. So let me chat for a second. I'm sure that a lot of listeners are doing what I've been doing, and I had the map pulled up the whole time. I know this area, not like you do, but I know I work a lot in this area. And so, I'm looking at all of these landmarks that you're talking about around here. And I think about one of the most desirable features, and it's walkability. And you are just a couple blocks to get to Coventry Village, which is the whole series of streets over there. You've got Cadwell, Wilton, Somerton, Hampshire, Middlehurst, they all, and then you've got another park, which is right there on Cumberland. I know you guys have a house over there. But this sort of connects the dots between the neighborhoods, and I think what you're saying makes a lot of sense.
When you look at Little Italy, the landmark is the Holy Rosary Church.
That's
where
right.
they have the Feast of Assumption. That's
right.
The landmark. When you go to Ohio City, the landmark is the West Side Market.
West Side Market, yep.
When you go to Tremont, the landmark is Lincoln Park. When you go to the Detroit Gordon Shoreway, the landmark is the Art Deco movie theater. Every neighborhood that has popped has a landmark that defines it. The West Village landmark is the High Line. That is what ignited the land rush in that whole area. Now, if you can put together a synchronized plan, go after the Medusa building, encourage the metro parks to build out and build better and, clean up that park, you get the roads done, people are going to sense that things are happening in Forest Hill, and then it's going to radiate out. Because it's one thing to walk to Coventry, it's another thing to walk around the corner to that ghost town called Severance Town Center.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
I mean, that's just a hulk of empty. I mean, Home Depot is doing okay, and you got Kaiser and you got some medical buildings, but it's a disaster up there. It's one of those aging, hulking malls that was built, it was state of the art in the late 60s. But you are not going to get retail renaissance and restaurants and stuff like that if you don't have a viable neighborhood to connect it all. And that's what Ohio City has. That's what Little Italy has. Those old schools, that Catholic schools, they're down in Little Italy. They're now galleries and coffee shops
and condos.
Yeah, exactly. So, folks, replay this one and get your Google Maps out and let us take you around Forest Hill. Take a look at it. You can contact us at ReillyProperties.com. We can roadmap you into homes that are vacant, that are looking to be snapped up, that aren't even on the MLS. And let's finish this all up by talking about those buying opportunities. Mike?
I'm here to take those calls as well.
I know you are. No, but I have to say that there are an interesting opportunity to buy vacant property in Cleveland. And we're going to talk about that on our next podcast. We talk about point of sale and these vacant houses. So stay tuned for part 2.
Looking forward to it.
Thank you for listening to the Cleveland Real Estate Investor Podcast. Find all of our episodes at www.reilly-properties.com, or you can find us on your favorite streaming services like Apple Podcast, YouTube, Spotify, Overcast, and more. A new function of the podcast is that we are starting an email that you can request any topics, or if you have any questions, we'll answer them. You can email us at theclevelandrealestateinvestor@gmail.com.